Welcome back. Ivory Coast government is seeking more assistance from the International Monetary Fund to support the nation's 2017 budget after cocoa prices slumped, hurting the finances of the world's biggest grower. Ivory Coast will issue the request as representatives of the IMF visit the West African nation until the first week of April for a review of the country's 3-year extended credit facility agreement of about $660 million. Cocoa futures in London have slumped by about a third since reaching a 6-year high in July. And the Africa Finance Corporation is one of the leading investors in some of Africa's key power projects aimed at bringing power to the estimated 600 million Africans who currently are out of the continent's electricity system. The Channel's business editor, Bosun Omofe, caught up with the AFC's Chief Executive Officer Andrew Ali at the just concluded Africa CEO Forum event in Geneva for more on the vexed discussion on sustainable power, in particular for Africans at the bottom of the pyramid.
Very interesting, Mr. Ali, when we talk about lighting up Africa, electricity, power, where do you really see light at the end of the tunnel for the continent?
Well, I was just on a panel about off-grid power solutions, and I do believe that given the way technology around off-grid, particularly solar power, but also other types of off-grid, has improved over the last few years and continues to improve, that will certainly be a major part in getting power to Africans. There are about 600 million people on the continent of Africa who are not connected to the grid. And to be frank, the current solutions that are being followed around, big utilities connecting people, through transmission and distribution is not going to get to all of those people. So a new and radical approach is needed if we're going to provide power to a large number of Africans, and I and certainly a lot of other people believe that these new technologies around renewable power will be at least a very major part of the solution. You need to look at this thing very carefully in terms of the cost and the availability of money at the bottom of the pyramid. For example, and it was cited in our panel, a person who does not have access to the grid right now pays about approximately $1 every time they recharge their phone, which is probably 100 times more than it costs me, who is connected to the grid, to charge my phone. Now, if you're offering them a power that is even 4 times what I'm paying, but they are able to charge their phone 90% cheaper than they're currently paying, that is actually a benefit for them. So I think it's very important to look at what it is that people are using power for, what they're paying for it today, and how much solutions that are available even now can save them in terms of those costs. Because if we start to say that, people in the cities who are connected to the grid are paying 10 cents per kilowatt hour, and people in the rural areas can only afford to pay X cents per kilowatt hour, and we start looking for a solution to deliver power at that price point, it may be impossible, at least today with today's technology. But if you're saying, okay, what do they need? They need to charge their phone, they need to run their business, how much are they paying today? How much can we save them? Then that's a different way of looking at it. Now, if you come to the fundamental thing about financing, again, if you look at how things are paid for, what are people really saving, and how much are you paying versus how much is the cost of delivering this thing, then you can start to develop financial solutions. One of the beauties of off-grid solutions is that they're very small and they're very modular. So, if you're building a dam, you need to find $1 billion on day one to pay for that dam. But if you're, building something with solar panels, you just find the money for one solar panel today. Tomorrow, when you have a bit more money, you can add another solar panel. So while in absolute terms the cost may be big, But, in terms of how it can be phased, how you can develop a business model to finance it, I think that, we have solutions that even today we can start to roll out. And I'm not making this up. There are companies in East Africa. There's one called M-Kopa. There's some in Nigeria called Nova Lumos, amongst others, who are already doing this and who have rolled this solution out to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of people in rural areas. Again, I would not look at it as, how many years will it take to deliver. I think we need to look at it as, how much will things be transformed in 5 years? How much will things be transformed in 10 years? How much will things be transformed in 20 years? Again, and I don't like to draw too many parallels between phones and power because they're very different industries. But if you look at Africa, it took us, probably 20 years to get from the initial launch of pay-as-you-go phone systems to a point where substantially all of the population of Africa has access to a telephone in one way or the other. So I expect that, if you're talking about how long will it take to get to a point where a large proportion, the majority of people in Africa will have, access to the grid, unfortunately, I think you're talking in a scale of decades, not years. But if you're talking about what can we expect to see in 10 years, I think we can expect to see a substantial improvement. I can't give you a specific number, but a substantial improvement, a multiple of what we have today in terms of access to power. I believe the African Development Bank has a target to connect something like 75 million new people to power over the next decade. Frankly, I think that more could be achieved than that.
BP has made a gas discovery in the North Damietta offshore concession in Egypt's East Nile Delta, its third in the block. The Quatermain Shallow 1 exploration well was drilled to a total depth of 1,961 meters in water depth of around 108 meters. The well is 60 kilometers north of Damietta City in northern Egypt. BP has 100% equity in the discovery. BP produces around 40% of Egypt's total gas. And finally, South Africa's main opposition party wants the anti-graft watchdog to investigate whether the acting CEO of power utility Eskom violated procurement rules for allegedly giving contracts to a firm where his stepdaughter was a director. The Democratic Alliance says it will write to the public prosecutor, a constitutionally mandated watchdog, urging the probe to establish if Mashela Cocoa violated state procurement guidelines by awarding the tenders. Reports say Eskom awarded tenders worth 1 billion rand to a company where Cocoa's stepdaughter was a director at a time when he had oversight of the department at the utility that gave out the contracts. And that's it on the program. Thank you very much for watching. I'm Chimize Obi Iwago.